I remember the day I left for deployment like it was yesterday. The morning was cool, with a faint mist lingering over the ground as I pulled my duffel bag from the trunk of my car. My heart was heavy, not just from the weight of the gear I was carrying, but from the looming separation from my wife, Emily. We had been married for 3 years, and while I had always known that my job would take me away, nothing could have prepared me for the emotional toll it would take on both of us. Emily stood on the porch, her hands nervously twisting a silver bracelet I had given her on our first anniversary. I could see the mix of pride and sadness in her eyes as she forced a smile, trying to be strong for me. "I'll be waiting for you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, trying to reassure her that everything would be fine. I believed it, too. I trusted her completely. After all, we had built a life together, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and plans for the future. The deployment was challenging, to say the least. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. I found solace in the camaraderie of my fellow soldiers, but there was always a part of me that felt an ache for home. I would often scroll through pictures on my phone, looking at the snapshots of Emily living her life while I was away. I remembered the last time we spoke before I left. She promised to write me every day, to keep me updated on everything happening back home. I held onto that promise like a lifeline. As the months dragged on, the anticipation of returning home grew stronger. I imagined the moment I would walk through the door, how she would throw her arms around me, and how everything would feel right again. I envisioned us sitting on the couch, sharing stories about our time apart, and laughing about the little things that made our life special. But as I sat in my barracks, the reality of my situation weighed heavily on my mind. I was thousands of miles away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. I kept myself busy, focusing on my duties and training. But in the quiet moments, doubt would creep in. I wondered how Emily was coping. Was she lonely? Was she missing me as much as I missed her? I told myself that she was strong, that she would be okay. But as the deployment stretched on, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the mission ahead, determined to come home and reclaim the life we had built together. When the day finally came for me to return home, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I was ready to embrace my wife and reconnect with the life I had left behind. But little did I know that everything would change in an instant, and the love I thought was unwavering would be tested in ways I could never have imagined. As I boarded the plane, I thought about the surprises I had planned for Emily. I had saved up and bought her favorite flowers, a beautiful bouquet that would greet her when I walked through the door. I wanted to sweep her off her feet, to remind her of the love we had. But in the back of my mind, that nagging doubt still lingered. I shook it off, determined to focus on the joy of being reunited. The flight home felt like an eternity, but I held onto the image of Emily waiting for me. I could almost feel her warmth, her laughter, the way she would look at me with those bright, sparkling eyes. I was coming home to her, and I was ready to embrace whatever awaited us. As the plane touched down, a mix of excitement and anxiety coursed through me. The moment I stepped off that aircraft, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was finally home. I grabbed my bag and made my way through the terminal, my heart racing with the anticipation of seeing Emily again. I couldn't wait to wrap my arms around her, to feel her heartbeat against mine. But as I approached the arrival area, I was hit with an unsettling feeling that I couldn't quite place. The crowd was buzzing with families reuniting, tears of joy and laughter filling the air. I scanned the faces, searching for Emily. But as I waited, the minutes felt like hours, and a knot formed in my stomach. Where was she? I pulled out my phone, hoping to see a message from her, but there was nothing. I tried to shake off the creeping anxiety, convincing myself that maybe she was just stuck in traffic or lost in the crowd. Finally, I spotted her. She was standing near the entrance, but something was off. She looked different, distracted, her eyes darting around as if she was searching for someone. My heart sank as I approached her. I called her name, and she turned, her face lighting up for a brief moment before fading into something I couldn't quite decipher. It was as if she was masking a whirlwind of emotions beneath a thin layer of excitement. "Jake, you're back!" she exclaimed, rushing into my arms. It felt good to hold her again, but the warmth I craved was overshadowed by an unsettling tension in the air. I pulled back, searching her eyes for the love I had missed so deeply, but there was a flicker of something I couldn't ignore, guilt perhaps. We made small talk on the drive home, but I could sense her unease. The silence felt heavy, and my mind raced with questions. Was she really happy to see me, or was there something else lurking beneath the surface? I tried to dismiss my worries, focusing instead on the excitement of being back in our home, but the pit in my stomach refused to go away. That night, as we settled on the couch, I noticed her phone buzzing incessantly. She glanced at it, biting her lip before silencing it. "Sorry, it's just work," she said, but the way she avoided my gaze made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed the day in my head, looking for clues, but the exhaustion of the past months weighed heavily on me, pulling me into a restless sleep. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to make breakfast for Emily. I wanted to recreate the warmth of our mornings together, filled with laughter and love. As I prepared the meal, I noticed her phone again, sitting on the kitchen counter. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the best of me. I picked it up, intending to give it back to her, but as I glanced at the screen, my heart dropped. There were messages, lots of them. The names on the screen were unfamiliar, but one stood out: Ryan. My stomach churned as I opened the conversation. The messages were flirty, filled with inside jokes and laughter that felt foreign to me. I read through them, my heart racing as I pieced together the truth that I had been dreading. Emily had been unfaithful. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt the world around me begin to spin. I dropped the phone back onto the counter, my hands trembling. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of shock, anger, and betrayal flooding my veins. How could she do this to me? I had trusted her completely, had fought for our love while I was miles away, and here she was, sharing her life with someone else. I felt like I was drowning in confusion and heartbreak. As the reality of her betrayal sank in, I found myself pacing the kitchen, trying to wrap my head around what I had just discovered. I felt a storm brewing inside me, a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't contain. The love I had for her was quickly morphing into a seething anger. How could she look me in the eyes and pretend everything was fine while she was betraying me? I knew I had to confront her, but a part of me hesitated. I wanted to give her a chance to explain, to understand what had led her to make such a devastating choice. But as I faced the reality of my situation, the pain was too raw. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth. The moment Emily walked into the kitchen, I felt the tension crackle in the air. I could see the smile on her face falter as she caught a glimpse of my expression. "Jake, what's wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. I took a deep breath, my heart racing, and prepared to confront the woman I had once loved with all my heart. The atmosphere in the kitchen was thick with tension. Emily stood there, her brow furrowed with confusion as I faced her, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me, threatening to crush me under its enormity. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the anger simmered just beneath the surface. I had to confront her, had to demand answers. "Emily," I began, my voice steady but low, "we need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly, and I could see the gears turning in her mind as she braced herself for what was coming. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone laced with feigned innocence. I didn't have time for games. I held up her phone, the screen still lit with the messages I had seen just moments before. "I mean this," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I saw the messages, Emily. I know about Ryan." Her face paled, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. "Jake, please let me explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "How you could betray me while I was serving my country. How you could throw away everything we built together for a few cheap thrills." The anger surged within me, fueled by the betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. I could see her scrambling for a response, searching for a way to justify her actions. "It wasn't like that, I swear. I was lonely and things just happened." Her voice trembled, and for a moment I almost felt pity for her, But that pity quickly vanished, replaced by a cold, hard realization. Lonely, I echoed incredulously. You think that's a valid excuse? I was fighting for our future, Emily. I was halfway around the world and you were here in our home, sharing your life with someone else. I could feel the heat radiating from my body, the fury spilling over as I fought to keep my emotions in check. I didn't mean for it to happen, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I thought you would be gone longer. I thought you wouldn't find out. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding my gaze, and I could see the guilt etched on her face. It was a sight I had never expected to witness. The woman I loved, reduced to a trembling figure caught in her own web of lies. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had always believed in communication, in working through issues together, but this was a betrayal that cut to the very core of who I was. I had trusted her implicitly, and she had shattered that trust like glass, leaving me with jagged pieces that threatened to pierce my heart. Do you even understand what you've done? I asked, my voice low and steady, though the anger still simmered beneath the surface. You've broken our vows, our commitment to each other. I came back to build a life with you, and instead you've left me with nothing but this heartache. Emily started to cry, her tears falling freely as she tried to reach for me. I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, I do. But her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage something that was already lost. I shook my head, stepping away from her grasp. Love isn't just a word, Emily. It's an action, a commitment. You've shown me that you don't value what we had. The realization settled in my heart like a stone. I was worth more than this betrayal. I deserved better than a woman who would throw away our love so easily. The silence between us was deafening, filled only with the sound of her sobs and my heavy breathing. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me, forcing me to confront the reality of our situation. I couldn't stay in this toxic environment, clinging to the remnants of a love that had been shattered. I need to think, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned away from her, needing space to process everything. I felt sick to my stomach, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had come home expecting to rekindle our love, to embrace the life we had built, and instead I was faced with the reality of her betrayal. As I paced the living room, my mind raced. I thought about the life I had envisioned with Emily, the dreams we had shared, and now it all felt like a cruel joke. I had trusted her, and she had taken that trust and thrown it away. I felt anger, heartbreak, and betrayal clawing at my insides, but beneath it all I sensed something else, an undeniable sense of empowerment. I could choose to stay and fight for a love that had been tarnished, or I could walk away and reclaim my life. The thought of leaving filled me with a strange sense of freedom. I didn't have to accept this betrayal. I was stronger than I had ever realized. As I stood there, the decision began to crystallize in my mind. I couldn't let her actions define me. I had been deployed, fighting for my country, for our future, and now it was time to fight for myself. I was done being a victim of someone else's choices. I would rise from this stronger and better than before. Jake. Emily's voice broke through my thoughts, and I turned to face her. Her eyes were red and puffy, but there was a flicker of hope in them. Please don't leave me. I can change. We can fix this. But I knew deep down that it was too late. I had already made my decision. I was ready to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going to let her hold me back any longer. The days following that confrontation were a blur of emotions. I felt as if I were a fog moving through life on autopilot. I had made the decision to leave, but the reality of it loomed over me like a dark cloud. I had left the love of my life, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, but the betrayal still stung. The anger I felt was a fire that burned bright, but it also ignited something else within me, a fierce determination to reclaim my identity and my life. I spent the next few days at a friend's place, trying to find some semblance of peace. It was strange being away from the home I had shared with Emily, but it felt necessary. I needed space to think, to process the whirlwind of emotions that had been unleashed. I started to focus on myself, channeling my pain into personal growth. It was time to rediscover who I was outside of our relationship. I began to hit the gym again, pushing myself harder than ever before. The physical exertion was cathartic, allowing me to release the pent-up anger and frustration that had been building inside me. I threw myself into my workouts, lifting weights, running until my legs burned, and sweating out the tension that had been suffocating me. It was a way to reclaim my strength, to remind myself of the power I had within. As the days turned into weeks, I also focused on my mental and emotional health. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages in an attempt to make sense of everything that had happened. I reflected on the good times I had shared with Emily, but I also confronted the reality of her betrayal. I wrote about my feelings of anger and sadness, but also about my hopes for the future. It was liberating to put my thoughts into words, to acknowledge my pain instead of burying it deep inside. I sought out support from friends who had been there for me during my deployment. They listened as I recounted the story of my heartbreak, and their encouragement motivated me to continue my journey of self-discovery. They reminded me that I was not alone, that I had people who cared about me and wanted to see me succeed. It was a reminder that I was worthy of love and respect, and that I could rebuild my life on my own terms. I also began to explore new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but had put on hold while I was with Emily. I took up painting, finding solace in the strokes of the brush against the canvas. I found joy in expressing myself creatively, allowing my emotions to flow freely through my art. It was a form of therapy, a way to channel my pain into something beautiful. As I transformed physically and emotionally, I began to feel a sense of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was no longer just Jake, Emily's husband. I was Jake, a man with dreams and aspirations of his own. I started to envision a future that didn't include her, one where I could pursue my passions and create a life filled with purpose. The more I focused on myself, the clearer my path became. I realized that I had been so wrapped up in our relationship that I had lost sight of who I was as an individual. I had allowed Emily's choices to define my worth, but no longer. I was reclaiming my identity, and it felt exhilarating. One evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, I took a long look at myself. I was different, stronger, more resilient. The man who had walked away from Emily was not the same man who had been deployed months earlier. I had faced heartache and betrayal, but instead of letting it consume me, I had chosen to rise above it. I was ready to embrace my new life, to move forward without the weight of betrayal holding me back. I knew that the process of healing would take time, and I was prepared for it. I was no longer afraid of the future. I was excited about it. I had learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and self-worth. I understood that my happiness was not dependent on someone else. It was something I could cultivate within myself. The transformation had begun, and I was ready to take the next steps toward my new beginning. I was determined to leave the past behind and step into a future filled with possibilities. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it would not define me. I was reclaiming my life, and nothing could hold me back. The day had finally come. I had spent weeks planning my departure, and the closer it got, the more resolute I felt. I had made arrangements to gather my belongings and set a time to leave the house I had shared with Emily. It was both liberating and terrifying. I had spent so much time in that home, building a life with her, and now I was preparing to dismantle it all and walk away. I arrived at the house early in the morning, the sun still low in the sky, casting a warm glow on the familiar surroundings. The sight of it filled me with a mixture of nostalgia and determination. I parked my car in the driveway and took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I knew I was doing the right thing, but the emotional weight of it all pressed heavily on my chest. As I stepped inside, the memories flooded back, our laughter, our shared dreams, the life we had built together. But alongside those memories was the sharp sting of betrayal, the knowledge that everything had changed. I felt a surge of anger, but I channeled it into my resolve. I was reclaiming my life, and I wouldn't let the past hold me hostage any longer. I began to gather my belongings, starting with the things that meant the most to me. I packed up my clothes, my books, and the few personal items that reminded me of who I was before Emily's betrayal. I worked quickly, trying to keep my emotions in check. The more I packed, the the more I felt a sense of clarity. I was not just leaving a physical space, I was leaving behind the pain and heartache that had consumed me. As I moved through the house, I could hear the faint sound of water running in the bathroom. Emily must have been getting ready for her day. I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly brushed it aside. This was about me now. I had to prioritize my well-being over her feelings. I was reclaiming my identity, and I couldn't afford to be swayed by her presence. Just as I finished packing the last of my belongings, I heard the bathroom door open. Emily stepped out, her hair still damp and her face devoid of makeup. She looked at me, confusion and concern etched on her features. "Jake, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. I turned to face her, my heart racing. "I'm leaving, Emily. I can't do this anymore." The words felt heavy in the air, but there was also a sense of relief in finally saying them aloud. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. Her eyes filled with tears as she stepped closer, her hands reaching out for me. "Please don't go. We can work this out. I can change. I love you, Jake." Her voice cracked with desperation, but I felt a wall building around my heart, a wall I had fortified over the past weeks. "Love isn't enough, Emily. I can't trust you anymore. You've broken our vows, and I can't stay in a relationship built on betrayal." I felt the anger surge again, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had to stay strong. I had to remember why I was leaving. Emily's face fell, and I could see the realization hit her like a tidal wave. "You don't mean that," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You can't just walk away from everything we had." "I have to," I replied, my voice steady. "I deserve better than what you've given me. I deserve to be happy, and I can't find that here." The words echoed in my mind, a mantra I had repeated to myself over and over. It was time to reclaim my happiness, to find my own path. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I couldn't let her words sway me. I had spent too long allowing her to dictate my happiness, and I was done. I turned away, focusing on the last few boxes I had packed, determined to keep my emotions in check. As I loaded my belongings into the car, I could feel Emily's gaze on me, a mixture of sadness and regret. I took one last look at the house, the place that had held so many memories, both good and bad. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly overshadowed by the sense of liberation that filled me. I was moving forward, and I wouldn't let the shadows of the past hold me back any longer. With everything packed, I closed the trunk and turned to face Emily one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, my voice steady, "but I have to go." As I walked away, I could hear her sobs behind me, but I didn't look back. I knew that turning away was the hardest part, but it was also the most necessary. I was reclaiming my life, and I couldn't allow myself to be pulled back into the darkness. I got into the car and drove away, the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders with each passing mile. I was free. I was ready to embrace my new life, one filled with possibilities and the promise of a brighter future. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it would not define me. I was moving forward, stronger than ever before. As I drove away from the house that had once been my home, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling within me. There was a sense of loss, of course, but it was overshadowed by an exhilarating feeling of freedom. I was finally free from the weight of betrayal, from the shackles of a relationship that had turned toxic. I was ready to embrace my new life, to forge a path that was truly my own. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself. I moved into a small apartment, a blank canvas that reflected my newfound independence. The space was modest, but it was mine, and it felt like a fresh start. I painted the walls a vibrant shade of blue, a color that reminded me of the sky on a clear day, symbolizing hope and new beginnings. I filled the space with things that brought me joy: books, art supplies, and photographs of friends and family who had supported me through my journey. I continued to hit the gym, pushing myself to new limits. The physical transformation was empowering, but it was the mental and emotional growth that truly changed me. I started to meditate, practicing mindfulness and self-reflection. I learned to appreciate the present moment, to find beauty in the small things that life had to offer. Each day became an opportunity for growth, a chance to rediscover who I was outside of my past relationship. I also reconnected with friends, those who had been there for me during my deployment and had supported me through the heartache. We laughed, shared stories, and created new memories together. I had missed that sense of camaraderie, the feeling of belonging to a community. With their support, I began to feel whole again. As I navigated this new chapter in my life, I also took time to reflect on the lessons I had learned from my experience with Emily. I recognized the importance of self-worth and the necessity of setting boundaries in relationships. I had allowed myself to become complacent, to prioritize someone else's happiness over my own, but I had emerged from the ashes of betrayal with a renewed sense of purpose. I was determined to never lose sight of my own needs and desires again. Eventually, I began to explore new opportunities. I signed up for art classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had the chance to pursue. Painting became a form of therapy, a way to express my emotions and channel my experiences onto the canvas. The act of creating something beautiful from my pain was liberating. I found joy in the process, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. As the months passed, I began to envision a future filled with possibilities. I had dreams of traveling, of exploring new places and meeting new people. I wanted to embrace life fully, to experience everything it had to offer. The world felt open to me, and I was ready to seize every opportunity that came my way. I had also learned to embrace vulnerability. I realized that it was okay to feel pain and to acknowledge my emotions. I no longer saw vulnerability as a weakness but as a strength. It was a part of being human, and it allowed me to connect with others on a deeper level. I was ready to open my heart again to trust, but this time I would do so with the knowledge of my own worth. One evening, as I stood in front of the canvas, brush in hand, I reflected on how far I had come. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had faced betrayal and heartache, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, and my happiness. As I painted the final strokes on my latest piece, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to face the future with courage and determination. The pain of the past would always be a part of my story, but it would not define me. I was moving forward, empowered by my experiences and ready to embrace the life I had always dreamed of. Looking back, I realized that sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself again. I had walked away from betrayal, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I was no longer just Jake, Emily's husband. I was Jake, a man who had fought for his happiness and emerged victorious. And as I stepped into the future, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. The world was mine for the taking, and I was determined to make the most of every moment.